In metaphysics, my philosophy, objectivism, holds that there is only one reality, not two, nor four, nor 10.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reality. My name is William, and I'm here with Lev.
Hello, everyone.
Our topic today is the Postal Service. There's a current controversy brewing over how to keep the Postal Service afloat when it's having all kinds of problems with service being delayed and the budget losses, and also how the Postal Service will be able to cover all the ballots for the upcoming election. I think Trump has argued that the Postal Service can't handle all the mail that will be flooding it if we do universal mail-in ballots. And the Democrats are arguing that we should give the Postal Service more funding in order to keep it alive and able to function properly. So we're going to discuss, in general, the controversy over the Postal Service, and then move into privatizing, whether we should privatize the Postal Service and how that would function in a society where government isn't in charge of delivering mail. Would you like to add anything to that, Lev?
I would like to add that I find the concerns among Republicans and Democrats often blown out of proportion. Democrats, as far as almost freaking out that this is the only way the election can go on, that the post office has to pick up ballots and has to process the different votes, and that without that, nothing's going to work. Or Republicans thinking that mail-in ballots are like the worst idea ever and it's prone to fraud. I don't think that's really sensible. But overall, I don't think it should even be an issue that the post office shouldn't even be an issue here. It should be a non-issue, have nothing to do with the election. Our election shouldn't depend upon the function of the post office, and nor has it been historically. Like, the point of the post office isn't to maintain our election, and if you're relying on that, something's very wrong already. And even relying on that could cause issues in the near future, and it would also be better to avoid the whole thing anyway. There's absentee ballots, they exist, and those work fine. If you want that, great. If you want in-person voting, that would work great too because of the virus. I mean, people function fine with 6 feet apart. The people are orderly. At least here in New Jersey, it works pretty well. There's no real concern, I think. Everything can work as normal. So I think it's just a point in time where the post office existed so long, and now people are really asking the question, why do we have it and why do we need it?
One concern the Democrats bring up are the new rules that the Postmaster General has put in place. Apparently, they've led to some delays. Their argument is that these rules are ridiculous. I think one of the rules was the trucks have to leave the facility at a certain time, whether they have mail on them or not, which causes delays because they can't get the mail on the truck, and so that there's a delay in service. So what do you think of these concerns that the Postal Service is not in any sort of shape to manage the amount of ballots that will be going through the mail?
I mean, I'm kind of doubtful in the logistic end that we can do it on maybe a local level, but I don't think it can be easily scaled to the national level. Scaling doesn't work like that. It's not just like, oh, it worked in state, therefore I understand it'll work everywhere. It's like, well, no, this is a national coordinated effort, and I think I'm doubtful the post office could handle it, because it's not built for that. It's not why it was designed. It's not why it exists. If you rely on a system to do something that it was never built for, it's going to cause problems. And as far as trying to figure out what to do with the election, I don't think this is the creative solution. And insisting that the post office will do it isn't really productive. It is about time there's changes to the post office, and maybe Trump is trying to be manipulative about it in his timing. I mean, why now? Why not a year ago? Like, why speed it up now? But it doesn't seem like it should be a concern. Just do voting like normal, and it'll be fine.
My understanding is that Trump wanted to cut the costs of the postal service. So that's kind of one of the reasons why there are these rules. I don't know all the details, but apparently they're trying to, cut costs, which makes sense. And I agree with you that the postal service was not designed to manage everyone's ballot in the United States through the mail. I think mail-in ballots should be restricted to absentee ballots that people request for particular reasons, like they're out of the country, they're on a military base, something of that nature. They can't be at home and go to a polling center. But I think that we have an established system of going to polling centers, and we need to figure out how to use those centers in this time of the coronavirus. And I think it's possible. If we can figure out how to go to restaurants during this pandemic, we can certainly figure out how to go to a polling booth. So
yeah,
I don't see a huge issue here. I think it's a made up problem by the Democrats. I think they are struggling to come up with distractions from their horrible ideas and their horrible response to the BLM riots, the Antifa riots, and everything else that they've failed at.
I would push back on that. It's the Democrats making a big deal. I mean, they are making a big deal on one aspect of that we have to do it this way, but on the other hand, I think Republicans are doing a similar thing to the extent that they're taking advantage of that hysteria to make it into a political issue that wasn't one, trying to not ignore it as it probably should be, but trying to make it into something more than it would have been, like Trump saying that concerns about fraud or even, I mean, that's not really even the concern. I mean, the point really should be that it's not even a worry at all. Like the post office isn't the solution anyway. It's not, it's like, who even cares? That's really how it should be. My thoughts on it, on the changes happening now, is I think Trump was just doing things as normal, whatever he had in his mind. He probably didn't even think of it as a political thing, because why would anybody think this will make or break or make a big deal in the election, even if you change things? They're just going to do things normally like in polls. But apparently, I guess Democrats wanted to make a political issue out of it, and that by seeing the issue made out of it, Trump then jumped on the opportunity to add more political spice to it, and he made it into something more than it would have been. Like, it's a feedback loop. Like, the Democrats make a big deal, then Trump sees it, he feeds on it, he builds on it, then he gets upset, then the Democrats get more upset because the orange man is bad, so they get more upset. Then Trump feeds on even more, and it just grows and grows until it's like it should have been a minor thing that was like a 1 day news item, but now it's like a whole month-long ordeal. And I think a lot of that has to do with maybe an American impulse to like certain industries, like they want it to be, or always think of it as a government thing, and the government has to do something about it. And it can't just ever be a private solution that a post office gets special attention or deserves special attention. Just some weird way of thinking that likes to focus on like statism, I guess.
Yeah, I think the Democrats got the message from Trump that he was trying to reduce the size or inefficiency within the postal service, which means cutting their budget. And the Democrats don't like it when you cut anybody's budget. And I think so. They made a big stink about it, and then Trump decides, all right, well, if they're going to make a big stink about it, I'm gonna give them a couple jabs. So he started in with the mail-in ballot, universal mail-in ballots, and I think his main issue was with the universal mail-in ballots, which has some validity in my view. I don't think you should just be sending a ballot to everybody on the register list. People who are registered to vote need to go to a polling center or request an absentee ballot. That's my view. It's not the government's job to be your mommy and to like spoon feed you a vote. If you're too lazy to get out of bed and go to the polling center and vote or request an absentee ballot, you shouldn't be voting in the first place. I don't think you're responsible enough to do such a thing as vote. You shouldn't even worry about it. Clearly you're not that interested in who represents you.
But I think that can transition to why privatization is relevant. That, I mean, a service like this, I don't think it's supposed to be like your dad or your mom just trying to guide you, that they provide you the things that you need when you need it just because they know you need it. And I mean, when we usually think of delivery or mail or getting things to people, we think of FedEx or UPS, and it's not that they're there asking us, so do you want us to mail you something? Like, you're always set to be proactive about using them. They're never just there. You have to go out into it. It's not, I mean, there's no trucks going to your house every day picking up your stuff. Like the mail is like they're just checking your house every day, whether you have anything there or not. But when you think about privatize, I mean, we could think about the efficiency, or, well, it's actually working more like a market, that you and FedEx are exchanging like value, like you're trying to get things to people and you're trying to interact better with other people. And I mean, that's the kind of mentality you need for privatization, even a functioning society or functioning elections, that we have to like think proactively, think about what we want and not have things done for us. I think privatization can reflect that way of thinking.
There's something about that relates more to freedom. You know, I think if the government, if we set a precedent where the government starts sending everybody a universal mail-in ballot, then that kind of opens the door for them to check on you. You know, like, what will they do next? Come and check to see if you filled it out, like they do with the census. You know,
Mhm.
if you don't fill out your census form, they come to your door. That's
Right.
happened. I refuse to fill out my census form and make them come to my door, and
Yeah.
they do it. And
Yeah.
so, if you don't fill out your mail-in ballot, are they going to come to your door and make sure you vote? I mean, it's just going to grow the bureaucracy of the voting department. You know, now we're going to need a whole department of state for voting.
Well, even in this case specifically, the post office, you'll have to expand the post office beyond what it already does. I mean, it's already kind of struggling. It's been that way for a while now, and expanding it, I think I don't think it'll fix anything. It's just increasing it. So I think your concern would be valid. It's not just they're implementing a change, but this change requires other changes, like expanding the post office, expanding the bureaucracy, expanding the observation on citizens. I think that's the implication.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of checks needed on the forms. So you're going to have to see if someone voted twice, if someone's alive or dead. You know, there's going to be all these disputes in court. It's just going to cause more and more problems when the government gets more and more involved in your life. You know, and if you don't want to vote, if you don't care about voting, then the government should just leave you alone. You should never hear from them about voting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do care about voting, the information's out there. You know where the polling center is. You know, go there, vote. And
Yeah.
I think that's the responsible thing to do. It's the idea that the government should leave you alone, even in voting. You know, you have a right to vote or not vote, and it shouldn't be shoved down your throat.
I agree with that. I don't like the notion in other countries where by law you're required to vote, and people are always concerned, like, how do we get more people to vote? It's so great that everybody has to vote now. And I'm just thinking when I hear that, it's like, isn't the point that voting is a privilege that you're happy to do? If you're not happy to do it, then why even praise the people doing it then? I would praise the people that want to do it, choose to do it, and think about doing it. I mean, I know I think about voting, even though half the time I don't even vote for president. But I always research what I want to vote for carefully. I think about it, and it is meaningful to me that I have the option to vote. And I've looked into absentee ballots even regardless of what's happening with the post office. I could give them to absentee ballots anyway. I've been proactive about how I can make sure my vote is counted. And it's not that much of a struggle or that difficult, and we have the means to do it. So I don't even see why the post office even has to be involved here, which would also make me think of, well, what is the post office needed for? Why do we need it? It's nice, but just because something's nice and could work doesn't mean it should be done that way. I'm sure all the problems could be solved with the post office, but should that be done by a government institution, given everything else the government's capable of? Should that be part of what the post office does?
You mean, should they be involved in mailing and receiving ballots?
Right. So, I mean, since we're agreeing that they probably shouldn't do that, well, what should they even do? Is there any valid reason for the USPS to exist?
There's a valid reason for some means of correspondence between government agencies,
True.
but that's handled now through couriers in the case of top secret information. In the case of lesser secrets or non-secrets, they go through the Postal Service or FedEx. So I think if we privatize, let's say we sell off parts of the Postal Service and it becomes private, then we have the question of should the government use those private companies to mail non-secrets around the country and maybe even lower class secrets.
I'm skeptical that a government should just rely on, for some instances, rely on private companies. I would almost say that a mini post office should exist strictly for the correspondence between the government itself so that it can function. I mean, of course, the government has to function. There has to, like, for instance, it has to have property for the buildings to be, and you can't just say the government exists as this abstract thing and everything else you just use a private company to just fill in the gaps in the physical aspect. I would say that government as an entity should have an arm within it that handles things, but not on a level like I send something to you. Like I send you a package. I mean, I don't think USPS should even exist for that. There's no necessity from the function of the government for me to get you a package. It's just a convenience for me. It's just a nice thing.
I read in one of the articles I sent you, there's an argument that was originally made, I think, for the Postal Service. It's because mail would be sent between states. So there might be a problem with certain states not complying with certain laws or regulations of mail service. They might confiscate some other state's mail or not allow it to go through their state. So there's kind of interstate problems with mail service. That might be an interesting objection to handle. I'm not sure that would qualify as a valid objection, because you could argue all kinds of things go through different states, like airplanes. So shouldn't the government own the airplane services?
It's true. I guess I would lean more towards that you just hire out a company. I do wonder, though, about the economics of it, considering that the government would have its monopoly in force and would exist by fiat even, and by funding and taxation or whatever else it might be, that it will necessarily always exist and doesn't operate on the same laws as a company running efficiently. You can't just say that profit isn't the way that the government functions, so efficiency doesn't work in the same way. And because of that, they can have a type of funding that doesn't have a concern for budget, and they would just have like almost infinite pockets, in a sense, that you have to use some other standard besides profit to judge if you're spending too much. And I think that gives room for a lot of issues and problems, and even favoritism towards companies. Like if the government used FedEx to do something, and imagine FedEx was the one company the US government always used, I think it would, by nature, that's favoritism to FedEx. I would wonder, like, if FedEx has to accept, when doing business with the US government, that they don't charge money, just so that they're always operating at a loss if they work with the government, but they also have the advantage of that relationship with the government. But that's my main concern about making it completely privatized.
I would argue that favoritism could be handled or limited through rules and regulations. Say they put a quota on how much they can use FedEx versus competing companies.
Hmm.
I think that's, I don't agree that you should have a postal service owned by the government. So if we privatize it, we need to figure out some way of managing this problem of favoritism and possible corruption and bribes and whatever. And I think that would be handled through rules and laws and oversight committees, either like a private group that watches, like a government watchdog group, things like that. I think those sorts of groups and laws would come up, would be created to handle this problem.
That makes sense. Committees could make sense, and it brings to mind though just big bureaucracies and things like that. But maybe that is the nature of how government functions sometimes. Bureaucracy is how government functions a lot of the time, because otherwise it's better to have it too constrained than free to do whatever it wishes. Something along the lines of a government really can only do what's been explicitly allowed to do. So a bureaucracy could help prevent some enormous arm of the government just acting on you in any way it wants.
Yeah, I think the problem with requiring a company like FedEx to work to perform the service without pay is that what benefit do they get out of it? It's not really in their interest to do that. I don't think they would be doing that. What would you see it as, like a donation? Maybe they could use it towards their donation to the government. Like if everyone is expected to give like a voluntary 10% donation of their income to the government, then maybe FedEx could say, in lieu of donating money from our profits, we'll just give you services.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I'm not really sure my objection or my answer of having them give services to government for free. I don't think I really thought that out well enough. I think there's probably a better solution than that. I was just trying to think of different ways to overcome that issue. I don't think, after thinking about it more now, I don't think it's a good answer. I think something more along those lines of what you're saying could make more sense, and they do have to get something out of it. There has to be some benefit or reason in the grand scheme of things that they should participate rather than the goodness of their heart. I don't think that ever turns out well.
Yeah, if we look at it in the current system, let's say we privatize mail delivery and FedEx takes up the slack. And so let's say FedEx moves into the letter carrying business and delivers generally to homes, just regular mail, first class mail. We're still under a compulsory tax system. So maybe one of the benefits offered to them could be, they don't pay any taxes. And instead of paying taxes, they deliver the government mail, which probably would end up being a small fraction of their business anyway.
Yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be that big anyway. I think the more important thing to think about privatizing is that, for the most part, there isn't any concern for the government. There isn't anything that you need to care about. It just, if you want to get something to somebody, and just like any business, I don't see why it has to be any different. I've heard people complaining about, like, oh, they need the post office to deliver their medication. Well, if you have really expensive medication, you're probably going to use FedEx. I know that for a fact. I think you would you would use FedEx to deliver medication. You would not use USPS. It's a kind of absurd thing to think it, or it's almost sad to think that if some people are relying on the like US post office to get their insulin, it's not really good. And I feel for them, like that's not good. It's not as, I mean, the post office I can say is generally reliable, but it's something as important as medication. It keeps you alive. I do trust a private company more. If I were someone with diabetes, I need insulin delivered, I would only do FedEx or USPS or UPS. Anything private, I would prefer. Because I can trust that if they have money as a concern, then I'm pretty sure they'll care about doing the right thing, as in getting me what I need, because money's on the line. I think it adds a level of incentive, especially on a personal level. You don't really need the incentive when like delivering between the government. It's not between government agencies. Like what we need privatized things for is the things that are most important about how we live our lives, not just a logistical thing.
Are you saying because of the profit motive, they have
Right.
a more of an interest in doing good service?
Right, that's more what I'm trying to say. And then that's why it's important to have like private postal delivery. And because that motive matters more for personal things. We aren't just trying to figure out logistics of our lives. There's important things to deliver and vitally important, and especially in a digital age where you ship everything all the time across the country, it's almost more important than ever to get mail done right, done exactly right, with no errors. I mean, one error is too much almost already. Like you can imagine how angry you would be or frustrated you'd be if you sent something by FedEx and it didn't get to the person. Or you'd be upset with FedEx, and one error is too much to you. It would be almost unacceptable. I don't know the failure rate of delivery for FedEx or UPS. I should look into that, but I certainly, my own vibe and even what I hear from people is it's better than USPS. You're not going to really lose anything if you go with FedEx.
You know, some packages get lost with FedEx.
It'll happen.
UPS, and I don't know the loss rate either, but I think that's sort of expected in any business of that size.
Right, there's going to be errors for sure, but you can
Not
always
just
minimize them.
But people stealing and damage. So a few different things can go wrong with the delivery, and that's to be expected. But I think on balance, you would trust the private company more, because especially if they have a good rating among customers. First of all, they are dependent on their customers. They're not dependent on forcibly taking money from taxpayers. They're dependent on giving you a quality product or service that you want to pay for. So there's that trade element. The problem with the Postal Service is that there's no real trade going on. It's just a government service. And all you can do if you have a problem is complain to the government or send everything FedEx or UPS. So if you have just a little letter you want to send, you don't want to spend $10 sending it FedEx. So in terms of first class mail, you only have the one option, which is the Postal Service, which costs you the cost of a stamp. But you you don't really have any means of complaining. What is the point of complaining to a service that you can't boycott?
Yeah, I don't even. I think that's a good point. I didn't really think of it that way. Who you complain to, if there's ever an issue. And certainly, there's that kind of bureaucracy even in FedEx. If you're complaining to somebody, but it does seem more personable, at least when FedEx has an issue. It just feels more human. I feel more comfortable with a private company.
That's the other thing is, who runs it. It's Jeff Bezos will ship his Amazon products right to your door.
Yeah.
The FedEx board, who runs FedEx, who runs UPS, but the government is just a bunch of bureaucrats. You probably don't even know their names unless there's a big controversy like there is now.
Yeah. I think without this controversy, nobody would have known who Louis DeJoy is. He would have just been like, nobody would have cared. They wouldn't even known he was a Trump guy. It's like Louis DeJoy, whatever, don't care. Don't care who he is. Did Obama appoint him? Probably. That's probably what people would think. It's like, I don't even know when the I don't even know the name of the position. Postmaster General?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
like, I don't even know how they get picked, when they're selected, how long their term is. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah. And is he like a dictator? Like what? Like, does he have people he's got to go through to get something done? Or is he just, his word is the law when it comes to postal service?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even, is he appointed by Trump? Maybe he's appointed. I don't know.
Pretty sure. It used to be part of one of the, I think the Postmaster General used to be like secretary of whatever that it was in the cabinet, but not anymore.
Oh, okay.
That was changed a long time ago, but I think it used to be part of the president handpicked it always, as far as I recall.
He's probably
I'm sure
appointed.
it's changed a lot.
He's probably appointed by someone that Trump has on his cabinet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming he has a lot of power over what happens in the postal service.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the guy you got to write to. I guess if you have a problem with your letter, your postcard not getting where you wanted it to go, you got to write to this Postmaster General guy.
Yeah, I think that we pretty much covered everything at the post office. I think it was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much in the same ballpark here on this question. It's just another example of some issue being all confused because of some other problem. I mean, we should be discussing getting rid of the post office just because it's a failed institution.
Mm-hmm.
And instead we're discussing it in view of this election fiasco. So
yeah.
It's like all these problems always get mashed together, and then you can't just focus on one or the other.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that conversation. I still feel like I have so much more to say, but I think we covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you next time.
Yep. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for watching this episode of Welcome to Reality. Please join us next time for another discussion where we apply philosophical ideas to moral and political action. To support the show, please share our content and consider becoming a sponsor.
You'll find a link to our Patreon page in the description of this video.